All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you for watching, or should I say listening, because we have our webcams turned off because we don't want our handsomeness to distract from the content of our conversation. We were worried that maybe people would be too overcome with just looking at, having one handsome guy is already a risk. You'll be judged on your looks rather than your intelligence. Having two, that's just too much. So anyway, I would like to welcome my guest for the next hour or so, however long we end up talking, Philip Rose, aka the Liberal Ogre, also known by some as the True Puka. We will be talking about all kinds of stuff on this hangout. So, Mr. Ogre, sir, thank you for joining me, Your Highness.
427 days, Steve. That's how long it takes your Catholic neighbor to forgive you for walking around naked in the front room with the blinds up. I discovered that because just the other day, for the first time in over a year and a half, they finally waved to me again. Now, I don't know if this is like, I know some about Catholicism. I know a little bit, but I'm not sure. Maybe some of the people in your audience who are Catholic can confirm me if this is actually an official thing that's somewhere in their books somewhere, because my wife, I just a little background here. At one point, our neighbors started being really unfriendly to us, and my wife pointed out, she was like, you're in the front room there, and you're not basically wearing anything. And I was like, do you think it's that? Do you think they saw in one night? And she was like, it's possible. They are Catholic. They have the whole little setup on the front lawn, with the little statue of Mary and everything. So they're very into it. And I was just like, well, shit, I didn't know what to say to that. I mean, as you're an atheist, right? I can't remember if you are.
Me? Oh, yes.
Okay, so yeah.
Oh,
so
according to me, I am. According to some, I'm not.
Yeah, I wasn't sure. Yeah, I can't keep up anymore. and I was a little bit offended because it's our constitutional right to walk around naked in our own homes. It's in that the Second Amendment, the right to bare naked arms and the rest of your body as you walk about. But
exactly.
So I got sidetracked already. We have like a title for the show, and right now you're frantically changing it, going, "What the hell am I going to call this?"
They don't know what we're even going to talk about.
Yeah, so I don't.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about Catholicism either. I've never been Catholic or been close to anybody who is Catholic, but I've seen how big the catechism is, and there's got to be something in there about what to do if you see the neighbor naked in front of the window.
Well, apparently 427. I'm wondering, actually, it's because I lost all the weight too. Like before they were looking in and they were like, look at that naked fat bastard in there. God, he looks so awful. But then I lost like 70 pounds over the past 4 or 5 months. And all of a sudden they're waving to me again. So maybe he approves of like my newfound sexiness or something.
What I want to know is, why were you counting?
Well, I checked back
off the calendar.
Well, that's the thing is, I remembered the actual day it happened because of something that my wife and I were doing. That we went to see a movie, and we were talking about it because when we left, they were like glaring at me, and I was just like, "Why are they giving me the stink eye? What did I do?" So apparently I offended them. So that's just which seems to be something that happens nowadays. People getting offended. That seems to be partly why we're here right now. Is people got offended.
Nice segue.
Oh, did you like how I did that? Yeah, it was very sexy. I know.
I'm very bad at that, and I really appreciate that. Yeah, there's been a lot of a lot of offense taken and a lot of offense given in our little corner of the atheist secular community here on YouTube. I'm always very careful when I talk about it, which I don't often do, but when I do, I try to make sure that I limit it as much as I can, because the atheist community is much bigger than it is on YouTube.
Yeah,
thank God.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to limit it because I'm sorry. Should I? Because I don't totally care if I piss people off.
Oh, please. You may.
Yeah, I used to care, and then I stopped. A lot of people, by the way, if you're familiar with me, I still am technically the True Puka. The channel still has that name according to YouTube. I rebranded as the Liberal Ogre for a number of reasons. One of them is it seemed more fitting considering the way our society is going. Because let's face it, I'm a liberal and I'm an ogre. I'm a New York City Jew of a certain age and temperament. We're all like that. And I realized, you know what? Everything I do at some point is going to offend somebody. I realize that it's just
Yeah.
the way it is. So I thought it might be better if I picked a more suitable look and name to. Like I'm sure I'll offend you at some point, you know, and
Well,
I'm going to
sure.
offend your audience. I'm going to offend TJ. I'm going to offend. I don't know. There's so many people out there I'll probably offend. I'm not sure, but it's okay. If you notice it, I was telling you about how my subscriber count has stayed pretty much steady for a while.
Mhm.
But what people don't realize is going on is it's fluctuating wildly up and down, and I absolutely love it because it basically stays about the same. But every time I do a video, I have this like trade-off of people coming and going, and I have no idea who I'm offending, and I realize, you know what, I don't really care. Because I'm kind of happy doing what I'm doing. And isn't that what matters? Isn't that all that really matters in life? Is that you're happy doing what you're doing?
Absolutely. You know, about the subscribers thing, I've had a drop in subscribers the last 2 weeks or so, I guess, ever since the Amazing Atheist put up his video about me. And some folks have taken that opportunity to gloat as though I'm supposed to be upset about it. And I can't figure out why I should be sad that people who like him are no longer watching me.
I'd see that's a strange phenomenon. I don't get that.
I don't get why. What is that? Why am I supposed to be upset?
Yeah, but I don't understand how this works. So people watch him and they watch you. So he said something or some things, I guess, because what was it, like an hour-long video? I don't know. He tends to do these marathon videos. It's like, fuck, you know, and I'm sure everybody does. Okay, you know, it's not just him. Everybody does it at some point.
Yeah.
But so basically, he said something about something negative about you, and people who formerly watch your material and like you all of a sudden, you know what? Fuck it. Yeah, I don't like him anymore because of what he said. So I don't quite really get what did you like? Are you Hitler? did he out you as Hitler? Is that
that's what it is? I think that's what happened. I've been trying to keep that under my hat for a while.
Yeah, I don't really. Yeah, I haven't really kept track. For those who are wondering, I'm going to speak about that video or what happened between you. I haven't really followed that. Just, I'm sorry. I know I probably should have. It's drama. It's so important. Yeah. But I didn't watch it. So I can't. I can't comment on a lot of that. You know, as to what happened back.
Well, I'm not going to comment on that video either because I didn't watch it.
Oh, okay.
I do not, as a rule, I don't watch people who make response videos to me. I've made an exception to that rule, I think, twice. And one of them was a video that Garrett made. That was a really good video that was about a disagreement with me about something that I had said in a video I made last year or something, where I talked about my feelings about legalizing prostitution.
Okay.
And I said I would be all for it as long as like the sex workers who work in those industries are protected. Like I just would feel horrible about enabling the exploitation of people. And Garrett made this really intelligent response video to me because he lives in a country where prostitution is legalized and is extremely highly regulated. Mm-hmm. And he says, actually, it works a lot better this way. You know, like people are a lot safer. People, people who work in the sex industry have more rights. They have more legal protections. If something goes wrong, they're not afraid to call the police. Like there's all these sorts of things that make it better. And I said, you know what? He makes a really good case. He's right. And I left a comment on the video saying, yeah, you're right. So I watched that response video. But people who make response videos that are all about, you know, what an asshole I am or what an idiot I am or, you know, how I'm not to be taken seriously because I support feminism, like that sort of thing. That's however many minutes that is. That's minutes out of my life that I cannot spare. Like
how many response videos do you get actually? Because I don't even know if I really get any. I rarely do.
It depends. They tend to come in spurts. You know, it depends.
The last one I recall having is speak of the devil. It was that fellow Live Life.
Oh yeah.
And it's funny that his name should come up because I heard that you had some kind of altercation with him at Reason Rally. I got
a response video from him in person.
Yeah. which I have to say that kind of annoyed me because when I met him at Reason Rally, I saw him with Coctopus. I'm not sure if that's the name he's using now. I guess they have a show they do together, or
I think he still goes by Coctopus.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. I don't pay attention to them very much. So.
And Live Life did one of the worst video responses to me on the topic of terrorism and abortion in America. Yeah. And I watched like a bit of it, And then I got irritated and I sent him a message, or I said something in, I don't know, Facebook.
Yeah.
Well, I was just like, well, do you want to debate this topic? Because what you're saying, you're essentially full of shit. I mean, no offense, but you're proving my point with what you're actually saying. And then I never heard back from him. And when I saw him, I did not bring that up because I said, you know what? I know I'm a dick, but I don't think I want to be that kind of dick. We're all here. We're having a good time. And then I hear he did that with you. And I was just like, oh, hell no. He did not just do that when I gave him a pass.
Right. He was that kind of a dick, just not with you.
Oh,
like, what's wrong with you?
I know. And now I'm just like, well, shit, let's do that. You know, you guys have a show. Maybe we should get into that and you should defend and justify the things you said. But you know what? Whatever. It's fine. It was just really funny when I heard he did that with you. I was just like, oh, I can't believe I can't believe I gave him a pass and he went ahead and did that.
Well, and you know, I'm in that conversation that he had with me. I didn't really have anything with him. I just sort of stood there patiently and waited for him to get done.
Well, you were drinking, weren't you?
He was, at least that was my impression. I was working on my first and only beer of the night.
Oh, God.
And when I was done, I said a fond goodnight to my friend that I was hanging out with, and I went upstairs and went to bed. But during our interaction, Live Life and I, the fact that I don't watch response videos came up because I think one of the first things he said to me, other than like, hi, when the conversation turned, you know, from, oh, hey, how's it going, to I'm going to have a fight with you. What he said was, did you watch that video I made about you?
Mm-hmm.
And I said, no, which was true because I didn't. And he said, yes, you did. And I said,
okay.
And I said, no, I didn't. Like, honestly, I didn't. I don't watch videos that people make about me. And he's like, you watched it. And I said, no, I think promise.
It's more believable it's more believable that you probably didn't. I tried to watch them and I always felt terrible that I didn't do response videos to people that did response videos to me. But I would just always mean to do it and I would never get around to it. And especially the really good ones too, because some people did some excellent response videos to me. And I have to say, I would watch them and they would make me think, which is a good thing sometimes. And
every once in a while it doesn't hurt.
Once in a while I do like to do that. And I would expand my opinion or my view because of something that people would say. And I felt, you know what, this is a case where I really should do a response video back to them. So I should at least let them know, because I would feel like, you know, I just don't want to just leave a comment. But then I would never get around to it because I'm just terrible. I was always terrible that way. I was absolutely always terrible. And I had a reputation for not doing response videos. And a lot of it was my fault. I admit it. Now you're in a different situation where you're putting out a video like every day of the week practically. So,
yeah.
and I'm assuming with the production, time it gets into like hours and hours. So
yeah, well, that's a big part of it. I mean, there's a practical part of it that I just don't have time, and the time I do have, I would rather spend doing my actual work and making the videos I care about, or spending time away from YouTube and not doing YouTube related stuff.
Yeah.
You know, so that's part of it too. But also, actually, I want to correct myself. I did watch one other response video that someone made about me last year, because I was a guest on an episode of a local public access atheism show in this area on Fairfax Public Access called Road to Reason. And when they invited me on, one of the hosts said, because it was right around the time that this response video to me had been made, and they said, we might, if it's okay with you, we might talk about this on the air. And I said, sure, we can talk about whatever you want. So I watched that video just so I would know what we were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And it was one of those that was like 40 minutes, 45 minutes. And it was just 40 minutes of my life I'm never going to get back. And the thing that struck me the most about it, and that I think is probably the case with most of these response videos that people make about me, just, you know, to get people to watch, to start drama, to start conflict, is that it was made in bad faith. Like, it's not someone who's trying to have an honest discussion and say, here's why I disagree with you. Now let's hash out our disagreements.
Mm-hmm.
It was misunderstanding, mischaracterization, taking out of context, arguing against stuff that I never said, you know, and that was it. That was all that it was. And, you know, never mind the time commitment that it takes to watch a video like that. but then what exactly am I responding to? I mean, if you didn't get the points that I was making in the video you're responding to in the first place, well, what am I going to tell you in my response to your response? And honestly, the content of my response doesn't even matter. What matters is that I have responded, because that's what they want. They want conflict. They want drama. They want to be able to say, "Oh, we made another video. Let's make another video about him." And I'm just bored to death by that. I find that tedious. You know?
Yeah, I've always been bad at those kinds of exchanges. I know there's a certain amount of value in it for promoting your YouTube channel and getting your name out there.
Yeah.
If done properly, there are some channels that have built a lot of fame doing that, but I've just always been bad at it.
Yeah.
So,
well, and the other thing is, and I think a lot of people, especially people who have been around YouTube for a very long time, and I've been around for a while now, but I came in and started making content right at the tail end of the sort of early YouTube era where you could make like response videos and they could be attached to the video.
Yeah, I remember when you came on the scene.
Yeah. And so I was never really part of that response video culture. You know, it was never really anything that I did or anything I wanted to do. When I would watch somebody's video and say, I'm going to make a response video. Like, I was just never part of that. I always viewed YouTube as a platform for me to say, hey, look what I made. You know, I had something.
Well, that's your channel direction. Yeah.
Yeah. I had something to say, or I had something I wanted to make, or something that I wrote and that I shot. And, I just wanted, hey, here it is. Here's where you can watch it. Yeah. What do you think? And so that's how I've always approached it. So I've just never had that. And, I like to argue, but I don't like to have pointless arguments with people who just want to start a fight, which is most of what this is, I think.
I did look a little bit at some of the back and forth that happened with Martin and TJ.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Now,
what's your take on that?
Well, let me stop this here. See, when I did the video I first did, one thing I left out of that, by the way, that exchange, and maybe I should have mentioned it in the video, but I was trying to keep it to a certain length, is the person who was angry with the two of us at one point started shouting out gay slurs against us.
Oh, okay.
Now,
this is you were on the street and the person ahead of you was a black person who thought that you were making
you know what? Let me give you a quick synopsis for the people.
Yeah, for anybody who might not have seen that video.
So what happened is there was this entire back and forth happening between Steve and TJ and Martin. I can't remember his last name. The writer.
Yeah, Martin Hughes.
Martin Hughes. That's it. Yeah. So, and I've been following it to some degree with interest, but not intending to jump in any way, just because, I've heard these kinds of accusations in the past against certain YouTubers, and my wife and I were discussing it as we were walking down the street in the village, and she had said something and I had said in response, and the part that the person heard me say was when I said they use racism to get their way. Now, I was using it in the context of there's a few things you have to accept as given when you have this kind of conversation. First, America does have a racial past. And the problems that come from that past, they still exist today. Because this is one of the big disparities you have between, let's say, white and black people in America, is they don't agree on to what level this still exists. And in fact, you go back to 2012, the period when you came on YouTube and started making videos around that time, a lot of the people we were dealing with, they either wouldn't acknowledge that, they wouldn't just mention it at all, the issue of racism in America, because there was this given attitude that it was no longer a problem, just like with women. Oh, well, this is no longer a problem. We're in an enlightened Western society. We have put these things behind us. That was the attitude really around 2010, 2012. Yeah. A lot of the channels were putting out there. And it wasn't until around 2011 that it really started to explode out. You started getting some bizarre things happening. Like, do you know the history of Stonewall?
Oh, yeah.
Westville? Okay. Yeah. So people might have missed this, but there was a gay bashing in the Stonewall Tavern around 2011, 2012. And this is something that it's unheard of. You couldn't believe it happening.
Yeah.
That this place that had this historic past for the entire gay rights movement, where the police used to come in and do, just rough up and beat the hell out of the gay customers, because that's just what they did. It was part of our culture. After going through the entire fight over gay rights that we thought we had gotten somewhere, we thought we had won, and then you have something like this happen. And it's just like you feel like you come full circle. Yeah. So what happened is we're walking blocks away from that when I was making a comment back to my wife where I was saying, well, yeah, it's, you have this whole dog whistle kind of politics. And as I put it to you, marketing, where you can basically outrage a portion of the population, get them worked up, and you can generate attention as a result of that. And that's how people win elections. It's how they get views on YouTube. Yeah. And it's not always intentional. And this is the frustrating thing about it. Just because you're doing it doesn't mean you're a racist doing it. Sometimes people are doing it because they genuinely want to focus on that topic. Now, depending on how you focus on it, then it could be racist, or it might not, but I was making the point where I was saying, yeah, of course they're focusing on this. And when I look at a channel like TJ's, I'm like, yeah, I can very much believe that he's taking advantage of this issue to try to generate views. And the person walking in front of me, one of the people, a black fellow, he overheard the conversation, but he only really caught that one part where I said they use racism to get their way. Right. And he flipped out and he started yelling back at us over his shoulder. And we didn't understand what was going on at first because we thought he had heard the entire conversation. And he was yelling, fuck those white bastards on YouTube. Yeah. So I thought it was incredibly funny and ironic that I was having a conversation where I was saying that people on YouTube like TJ were doing videos where they were using these racial issues to help generate their fame and fortune. And here I was being accused of being a racist while walking down the street, while actually defending them. And I just found there was a kind of like a poetic irony in that. So that's the background for the conversation that I was having, that I did the video that you're referring to.
Yeah.
Now, this gets into, there were a couple of points in Martin's article he wrote. One of the things he brings up, I'm not going to say if TJ is a racist. Okay, people have asked me about this, so I'll bring this up very briefly to give an example of why I think it's possible that, yeah, sure, he might be, but I think he definitely would do this kind of thing. He'd use this kind of terminology to do this. Do you remember Shirtgate?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Now, I haven't spoken to him since then because we had a huge kind of, not huge, but we had a falling out. I shouldn't say huge because I'm sure in the context of both our lives, it didn't friggin' matter one whit. I'm sure we both walked away and just fucking forgot about it and didn't care, but we stopped talking at that point. When Shirtgate first exploded out, he jumped on the gun to immediately do a video on it, bash, evil feminists, that kind of thing. And I contacted him to be like, hey, you're portraying this in a light which it really isn't, and you don't have all the information too. And I said to him that there's an entire professional industry out there that I'm a part of where we're discussing this and we're talking about it, and the reaction that we're getting from it, because when you deal with HR and HR related things and grievance complaints and whatnot, you talk about this kind of stuff because it's part of your job. And so I was trying to explain to him the reality of what was going on, how it matters in a professional context, but he didn't want to hear any of it. He had a story, a dialogue he had created that he was dependent on, the whole evil feminist thing.
Right.
And I was getting more and more frustrated with him. And finally, at one point, I think he challenged me to come on his show. I know that happened at one point during the entire back and forth exchange. And I had all kinds of people saying, oh, don't go on his show. Aaron and Lalandra, and they were like, don't go on the show. Trust me, it's a bad idea. And I was like, well, why? And I was like, I don't know. I've had arguments with people in the New York City subway. I don't think these people are going to be any worse or different. I'm not worried about it.
Right.
So, and they were like, no, it's terrible. So finally I was like, look, you know what? If he wants to do it, I'll do it. I'm fine. I don't have a problem with it. The next thing I know, he's not speaking to me, and I forgot about it because I didn't totally care. So I'm sorry if that sounds terrible. It's nothing personal towards him. It's just, it's the internet. You fall in and out of contact with people.
Right.
But it's only recently that it was brought to my attention, because this happened with a number of people where like I was invited on shows, and the next thing I know, it's not happening, where I was told, well, yeah, they no platformed you. And I was like, well, what's that? And they explained the concept of no platforming. And apparently there's this, I refer to them as regressive liberals. The title might not necessarily fit all of them. And just for some context here, I use the term, or rather explanation more than context, I use the term regressive liberal to refer to liberals who deny the existence of if you have equality in the law with civil rights, they deny or they refuse to really acknowledge or admit that there are still inequalities happening despite that equality, despite that legal equality. That's because really, when you look at it, like I've heard the term regressive liberal thrown about, and I hate to be like a word Nazi, but I'm coming from a point of, well, it's not totally accurate. For example, when they refer to the college liberals who are saying, no, we don't want these people on campus. We don't want Milo speaking on our campus. We want him to be banned. That's really an authoritarian liberal kind of thing. And authoritarian liberalism has been around forever and a day. It's been around since it first came about. So really, to say that somebody is aggressive liberal in America is to say that they're going back to a time before they acknowledge that social justice, or rather social injustices, existed in spite of having a civil equality.
Yeah, that makes more sense.
Yeah, so that's how I define it, and I'm sure people have a problem with it, but it's really, if you look at like, for example, like Milo at the Rutgers talk, he was invoking Martin Luther King, which they love to do, but what a lot of people don't realize is Martin Luther King, he was all for civil liberties, but he's the one who started the poverty movement.
Yeah.
And the poverty movement was entirely about him saying, hey, you know what? We have equality under the law, but we still are suffering injustices despite that equality under the law. We need to do something about it. And if he hadn't like inconveniently died, then he probably would have gone somewhere with that, which is why nobody really knows about it, is because he had just started and then, misfortune happened. Yeah. So to get back to what I was saying before I sidetracked again. Yeah, I do that, by the way.
Hey, I'm just going to let you go. So.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, this is why I tend not to do these shows, because if you just let me ramble, I will.
My what the hell is he talking about now?
No, I know. It's like my aunt used to say, you didn't just kiss the Blarney Stone. You brought it home and made it breakfast the next day. She would say that about me because I could just start talking and not shut the fuck up for days. So essentially, and I will come to the end of it is that's when I realized that they had done something called no platforming me. Now, what do I have to say to that? Oh, well, I mean, it's their right to not have me on the show if they don't want to. Am I going to be upset about it? No, not really. On the one hand, like, look at you. We've been talking about doing this show for a while, and a part of me really doesn't like doing these shows. So I don't pursue it too avidly, but at the same time, it's interesting that you have this kind of like power block from these type of groups where they don't want to let people have a voice in the debate, and then they go about and say, well, these people won't debate us. Right. It's like Milo himself. It was the funniest thing. One of the things he commented on was when they did Airplay, was it? I believe their Florida event, where they made a big deal about how nobody would come down and debate them. They had to like get some people in. They had to stand up for the other side. And I was just like waving my hand, I mean, I wasn't physically, I was just in my mind. I'm waving my hand going, hey, I volunteered to do that. I was like, I'm not sure where this whole, like, we can't get anybody to come down thing is happening, because I volunteered and everybody just, you didn't respond. And I'm sure other people did too. So, it begins to make you wonder if it's almost like this kind of like a conspiracy of, we want to pretend that the other side is refusing to engage and debate us while we refuse to engage and debate others.
Oh, absolutely. I think that happens a lot. I think it also happens when they start throwing around accusations of people being professional victims.
Yeah.
I mean, because to take it back to the Martin Hughes Amazing Atheist thing, I mean, Martin gets accused of or responds to the Amazing Atheist describing Black culture as a victim cult.
Yeah, I saw that.
And then the Amazing Atheist responds by throwing this epic tantrum about it and talking about how he's actually the persecuted one, and people are trying to destroy his YouTube channel. Now, let's think about this. If we're supposed to ignore the plight of Black Americans despite centuries of racial discrimination and racial inequities that still exist today, but we're supposed to feel bad for him because somebody wrote a blog article calling him a racist. Yeah. I mean, how fucked up do your priorities have to be for that to make sense?
See, I was reading I was reading Martin's piece, and it was unfortunate that TJ had to take it that one extra step and say like a victim cult. I think that was his exact word. It's like a victim cult, because there has been a debate and or discussion in the field of sociology over the concept of victim culture.
Mhm.
And okay, step back from the context of Black victim culture, which TJ was bringing up, just victim culture in general. Now, would you say that that exists, that kind of victim culture? And keeping in mind that the words victim culture, that phrase, it's kind of like nebulously defined as of yet. I haven't really heard a good definition of it that really satisfies me. Because look at like the religious right. They have absolutely doing their best to perfect the idea of a victim culture so that they can get their way in America. I mean, you see what I'm talking about?
Absolutely. And
so,
victim playing is something that happens a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. But then you look at, for example, with minority groups. And when you say it's a victim culture, well, it's like, well, what do you mean by that? When you're talking about a group, for example, that's the majority and the majority power, that they have their way. Well, saying that they're playing at being a victim when they're not actually a victim, then yeah, that's I can see that being a certain type of victim culture. Right. But when you're talking about a group that historically has been in the minority and has suffered injustices, then I can see you saying, okay, there's a victim culture in the sense that there's a victim mentality, which comes about as to how you react to the world, which is really, it's almost like a PTSD thing. Mm-hmm. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So what happens there is, depending on how you're using the word victim culture, you could be either trying to describe a sociological phenomenon, or you could be using it as a dog whistle term.
Exactly.
In order to appeal to a certain group out there that might be a little more right of left. You know?
Yeah. Well, yeah, because where the dog whistle portion comes in is, calling Black culture a victim culture. Incorporated into that statement is the assumption that Blacks today in America don't have anything to complain about. As you were mentioning earlier, that there's a certain mentality among mostly white folks in this country who think that, racism is no longer a problem. And if Black Americans are complaining about, suffering due to racism or racial inequalities or whatever, that it's just all in their head, or they're just being crybabies and they just need to get over it. And therefore they are, victim playing. When that, to me, that's not what's going on. They not only do they have legitimate grievances, still very much so, but the groups, the Black activist groups that are the most hated among that group of people are like Black Lives Matter, who are not just sitting around complaining, but are actually getting out and doing stuff. And that's what's pissing people off. It's not just that it's a bunch of Black folks sitting around at home going, man, life sucks. We're such victims. They're getting out and taking to the streets and holding marches and causing demonstrations and stopping traffic and making people notice them and listen to them. And that's what is pissing people off. So even if you hold to this skewed mentality that there's no such thing as racial injustice in the United States in the year 2016, they're certainly not just sitting around whining about being victims. They're participating in some very aggressive social activism, which is the reason that people who don't like them seem not to like them.
Yeah, it's frustrating. I wish that at times I wish that the other side wouldn't be so partisan in their politics when it comes to having these conversations, because there are some valid points to be made from both sides on this. But unfortunately, I look at how the conversation is broke down with TJ. Now, you tell me, would you say that, have you watched his videos at all? Have you ever watched his videos?
Like ever?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like
yeah.
in general.
And I've watched one or two in the past. Yeah.
I've always gotten the impression he is a liberal. Have you ever? Would you say that's a safe bet?
Yeah, and I mean, I think he fancies himself one, which I think is one of the reasons why he flipped out so hard when he was called out for saying racist stuff, because he doesn't see himself that way.
Yeah, well, see, I haven't kept up with his channel, so I don't want to accuse him of something
right
one way or the other, not knowing, because I haven't watched his videos in a while. I do know with the Shirtgate thing, for example, that's where I brought that up, because he has always tried to appeal to a certain kind of libertarian alt-right kind of section of his audience. They're a big block on the internet.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of views and money to be gotten from appealing to these people. It's just the way it is. Like do you remember that whole Voice for Men, that group, before that whole men's movement thing fell apart?
Yeah.
They were trying to do they were trying to do they were trying to have a conference,
Yeah.
which was like an absolute failure. I remember talking to him about that. He wanted to speak at that conference, and he had always tried to kind of appeal to their audience as well, and they never, and especially like Paul Elon, wouldn't have anything to really do with him, wouldn't have him speak there, because he didn't fit the mold of what they wanted as one of their speakers. And that was, you had to basically be just a real total shitlord. You know, I mean, that entire group in that movement was really just about, we want to spread as much hostility and antagonism as hate as we can, so we can direct views back to our site and money into our coffers. And if he couldn't do that for them, which, and I'm going to say, in fairness to TJ, like, he never took it that far. Like, he has said and done things that I get the impression that, you know, in appealing to these groups, that I personally, I would not go there. But at the same time, I think that somebody told me that they think he's trying to kind of like not lose his cred with those people. You know, he's trying to be liberal, but at the same time still keep that part of his audience, and that's why he goes to these places. I don't know if that's true. I just know that when you start characterizing Black culture as a victim culture, you've got a problem there. Like, I could see you saying that there are in Black culture, there are aspects of it where they delve into a victim culture mentality. Sure, you know, Jews do it. We do it too. Hell, there are jobs I have had where I have been sent into the negotiations with a particular company because the heads of that company, they happen to be Jewish or Orthodox, and they can, and it's a particular negotiation style, and it is entirely wrapped up in the concept of victim culture. And you think about it, it makes sense, because you're talking about a minority group that doesn't have a lot of power, so they have to make use of what tools they have in order to try to get their way. So that's how initially I think this entire victim culture thing developed, because they're doing pieces on it right now, the past couple of years, sociologists. I think it's always been around and out there. I think the internet has really brought it to a head and brought attention to it, because it's not victim culture really that's the problem, it's call out culture. That's really more of the problem here, if you see what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's an aspect, by the way, of that whole Jewish negotiation thing. Because how it works is, you go into a negotiation, you say something that outrages, and see if you recognize this, by the way. You're going to recognize this tactic. You say something that outrages or upsets the other side, they flip out, and then when you finally calm them down, you take advantage of the fact that they're now calm to get concessions.
Yeah.
Wow. Does that sound like YouTube to you?
The internet really is run by Jews.
Yeah, it really is. See, yeah, you learn from the best. Really, but like, I had somebody ask, one of the questions I got, and by the way, the first question was, I get my hair done at Tees, because that's where all the girls go who have naturally curly hair. The second question was why people are going after you lately in the way they are. Now, I have and this isn't really specific to you. This is more about what's going on in America right now. You look at the rise of Donald Trump, and I've been warning about something like this happening for a long time now.
Yeah.
This entire kind of like what they call edgelord, shitlord culture. People discovered that you can build large audiences and you can make a lot of money off of this. And I think what happened is Donald Trump took notice of that, and he said, hey, I could take advantage of this. And this is awkward for the people who have been doing this all along. And they've been saying, what we are doing in the end run, there's no real harm in it. I mean, yeah, sure, we're being bastards and assholes, and we're taking advantage of minority groups, and we're going after Muslims or women or feminists or whatever. But they didn't actually see that a real actual harm can come in it. That's always been the basis of the position they come from. But for the first time, we see the rise of somebody like Donald Trump, somebody who has actually taken what they do and taken it into the political arena, and is now, for us, in danger of being elected with a VP pick that is Mike Pence.
Yeah.
And if you know who he is, then you kind of are sitting here with this kind of unfortunate "I told you so" look on your face. Because thank God the atheists have been focusing on the evils of feminism all this time,
Exactly.
you know, and we can just ignore this shit that's going on here that's bringing somebody like Mike Pence, who actually went after, of all people, Nancy Reagan, accusing her of being a baby killer.
Right.
Because
For stem cell research.
For stem cell research.
Yeah.
Because, you know, this is a person who, like, he is so terrible in his views on LGBT rights. He's the one where a lot of the shows and businesses are just like, you know what, fuck it, we're not doing business in your state.
Yeah.
That's how bad he is. And this is who they're not focusing on. And this is the kind of thing that they're just kind of ignoring while they focus on this other shit, which, to be honest, okay, I could see doing a couple of videos on it. Granted, fine. There's some points to be made, but there are people out there who have done like video after video on like Anita Sarkeesian, till the point where I'm just like, oh my God, do you have an altar set up in your closet? Did you like buy a copy of her stained underwear on the internet and you're like worshiping it every friggin' day, and then you do a video as part of your guilt process? Is it like a picture of Anita and the Pope right next to each other, and this is the only way you can get off? I mean, sir, it's like you got to wonder about this kind of thing. But I get it. She like, you know, she also managed to take advantage of this whole outrage culture thing. She did a very good job of it. Like, granted, she's taken it in a direction where she has now built a legitimacy to her name. I was at a conference. I was at a conference, and Microsoft was representing there, and they had all their, I guess you would call them their vendor partners, or people that they interface with, on a screen in the back. You know, it's projected on the back, and feminist frequency is up there amongst them. And I'm just like, well, you know, if there's ever anything that shows a major victory and how the other side just friggin' lost against her, it's that right there. When you're actually got Microsoft putting your name up, your brand name up with amongst all the others, like serious, like major companies, then, you know, that's it. You kind of lost the show. And it makes sense why all these people are focusing on her, because she actually has been a genius at marketing. You can say what you want about her views and whether or not she's done anything really productive, but she is very clever about brand marketing. And I think it's one of the reasons a lot of these channels focus on her, is because they are piggybacking onto her ability to brand market and take advantage of everything that's going on out there.
Oh yeah. Well, there's definitely a market incentive to keep, like in the case of Anita, to keep making videos about her, and in a much more broad sense, you know, to make videos about how awful feminism is, or more recently, like how awful Black Lives Matter is, how, you know, it's the Black civil rights activists who are the real racists, and that sort of thing. There's definitely a market on YouTube or online in general that craves that kind of content. You know, there are people who have those views, who are probably mostly cis hetero white people, mostly white men, who are unhappy with what they perceive as the direction that things are going. You know, they're starting to feel a little bit more pressure than usual to change certain things about themselves, to adjust certain attitudes, to stop doing certain things that they have done that they don't think they should have to stop. And some of them are reacting very, very angrily to it. And when they see someone on YouTube or someone on TV or someone on the radio, I mean, in the 90s, it was like Rush Limbaugh, you know, he was or you know, some of the more regional, like underground right-wing radio hosts, who gathered audiences around them because they were saying these absolutely awful, borderline racist, in many cases, just out and out racist or misogynist or homophobic things. And that was what their audience wanted to hear. And it guaranteed that they would not have, they would not be able to break into the mainstream, because the mainstream had already moved far enough past that. But it would allow them to garner enough of an audience that they could sustain themselves. And I think that's very similar to what's happening on YouTube, where the really, really awful, hateful, angry, anti-feminist, anti-Muslim, anti-Black YouTubers many of whom unfortunately also happen to be atheists, have gained a great deal of success within a certain sphere, but they've also effectively shut themselves off for the most part from ever reaching, like, you know, the ultimate level of YouTube success. Like, none of them are ever going to be like a PewDiePie because they're just too toxic, but they will be able to garner a relatively large audience given, you know, because they feed the need of those people.
Yeah, it's you know, it's really unfortunate how this all developed. If you look, okay, you look to how it all really started back in the early 90s. You had the Western Journalism Center, and they spun off into Newsmax Media. I mean, you know the names I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And it was this entire model that they built around using dog whistle terminology to avoid appearing overtly racist while they appealed to a racist base. And part of what they did there is they really screwed over middle class white America, I have to say, because see, this is one of the conversations which you unfortunately cannot have anymore because of the way this entire dialogue is broken down. There has been for a long time a socioeconomic shift where poor people in this country are just getting poorer regardless of what their race is.
Yeah.
While you have like a small percentage of the wealthy are getting wealthier. Now, unfortunately, one of the negative results of how our dialogue works in America when it comes to race and it comes to privilege and minorities is that there is a whole middle America out there, white middle America, that's just been getting friggin' poorer and doing worse and worse. But what's happened is they focus exclusively, or they did until recently. I think that's beginning to change now, by the way. They have focused for the most part on how it's the evils of like Mexicans and liberals and black people. and so they just keep voting Republican and they keep screwing themselves over more and more until you reach a point where the country is just in terrible shape. And this is why I really hate what these people are doing, and what I hate what they have been doing is because they're focusing on really just piggybacking onto this right-wing message and taking advantage of it without really addressing this entire aspect of it in a way that doesn't make them pure racist as a result of it. Because nobody really wants to hear about that. Okay, nobody really wants to hear about middle America white poverty and what's going on there. It's just to put, for lack of a better term, it's just not sexy. It's like, you know, they're like, okay, you saw the recent study that they put out where they had where they showed I think it was a couple of cities in California and there was a couple in Texas, and then they had New York City as well, where they were trying to show whether or not black people really are killed at a higher rate than white people when it comes to police shootings. Now, granted, and the people who did the study, they said that it's not conclusive in the sense that we would need to do far more research in this format before we came to any real definitive conclusions. But the first thing they discovered is, oh, well, we're showing that white people are actually shot at a higher rate than black people are, which immediately this section of like the alt-right, they flipped out over and they went, aha, see, you know, look at this, white people are shot more, therefore no injustice to blacks. Because and everybody's ignoring, and this is the frustrating too, because the black activists and these white activists, they're not all white, unfortunately, for better or worse, they're fighting over this one point here. Everybody's ignoring the fact that they did point out, but when it comes to violent stop and just abuse of power, when it comes to just stopping and searching and questioning, oh, hell yeah, it's like 50% more with black people, 20% more with Hispanic. So yeah, we're absolutely going to town on that. And you got to say, you know, it's unfortunate because I get it. There's a certain, and I'm going to use the term again because I know it's offensive, but you know what? There's a certain sexiness to shootings, to blood and murder. There's a reason why they switched to what they call non-lethal tactics in engaging with the American populace. And believe me, they are still lethal and they still do damage over a long term. It's just you don't see it, so it doesn't have that visual shock that you get with a shooting. But when you talk about all the stopping and the frisking and the violence, that absolutely has a negative impact on the community. In a way, it's almost worse because it becomes ingrained in your thinking. So when you're sitting there saying, oh, well, you know, they have a victim culture, get over it, which is basically kind of what they're saying, victim culture, get over it. It's like, yeah, but how can you say it's just a victim culture when they're a culture that's clearly being victimized? If you look at what's going on right there in New York City. And then, do you remember the debate with Paul Elam when he was just like, I have no idea what you're talking about with the stop and frisk in New York City? And it's just like, how can you call yourself a men's right activist when you're not even aware of something that's impacting so negatively on men? Okay, granted, it's black men and Hispanic men, so maybe he doesn't give a fuck. Maybe that's the problem.
Well, yeah, that is the problem. That's why the NRA isn't flipping out over the black man who was a legal licensed open carrier who was harassed by the police in Dallas when he had nothing to do with that shooting.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
I mean, here's a legal American gun owner, you know, exercising his Second Amendment rights, who did everything right, who apparently turned his gun over to the police as soon as shooting started. I mean, was like, oh no, I'm gonna, you know, I'm gonna hand my weapon over to an officer. I'm gonna help people get out of the way, and he was still treated like a suspect because he was a black dude with a gun, and that's who they were looking for. You know, where's the outrage about that? Yeah,
it doesn't fit their narrative. It's like with the LGBT and the for the Republican convention, where they were just trying to get some of the elements of the right wing. Can we just acknowledge that, you know, that the Pulse shooting was actually that there were gay people there, that there were gay people in the gay club? Can we use the word gay?
Yeah, that he didn't just randomly pick a place.
No, I know. And this is where you get back to the whole thing with Live Life I was talking about, where it's like, well, yeah, of course it's hard to prove right-wing terrorism in America or anti-abortion terrorism because you're not using the language to refer to it in that way. At one point, I was going to do a response when I thought we were going to have some kind of debate. I went back into the New York Times and the Washington Post and a number of other newspapers. I went back into their morgues, back to the 70s and the 80s, because it is a problem when you're talking about right-wing terrorism in America, especially with abortion, where they never tracked it that way. They never talk about it that way. And you can read in the newspaper articles from that time where they will mention hundreds of incidents in a year of anti-abortion violence against people in clinics. But the problem is that when you read the articles, they'll refer to it as violence, but they admit themselves that the police don't report on it as terrorism. They don't often report on it as a criminal act. Yeah. So you have no idea how much really happened. You just know you keep looking, like, you know, 1983, there's a reference to 50 incidents in the country, 1984, a reference to 100, and it just builds over time. So you see they're referencing that these incidents are happening, but because we're not allowed to use a language that considers it terrorism or violence, therefore it doesn't exist. Yeah. And this is really the problem I have with a lot of the dialogue that goes on YouTube. Well, I get it. Your channel, you have a specific audience. You're focusing on that audience and you want to appeal to them and appease them. But at the same time, you're just building on this legacy we have of using specific language so that you can appease your audience and not piss them off. And as a result, you build a body of knowledge which doesn't accurately represent what's happening in the world.
Yeah. Yeah. We didn't, well, you solicited questions on your Facebook post. I did not officially solicit questions for this, but I did get a question on Twitter.
Okay.
And we mentioned it a little while ago when I brought up Black Lives Matter. And this is a question about something that happened a little while ago, but it's still sort of relevant to what we're talking about. So someone on Twitter wanted us to talk about the incident when Black Lives Matter protesters took over the Bernie Sanders event.
Okay.
And I think I have addressed this on You Had to Ask video I did closer to when that actually happened. But just in case anyone listening is interested and doesn't know how I feel about it, I'll say what I have to say. And then Puka, you can say whatever you want. And if we disagree about it, that's great. Okay. But I, generally speaking, as a white person, try to refrain from judging the tactics of Black civil rights groups, of civil rights groups led by oppressed people in general, because I feel like it is not my place to approve or disapprove of what they are doing, as long as they're not crossing some obvious line and, you know, inciting violence or whatever. I mean, they were practicing civil disobedience. Yes, they were breaking the rules. They were breaking the rules of decorum. Generally speaking, I think it's terrible to interrupt someone when they're giving a presentation or when they're speaking or whatever. Like, that's, you can't have a society where people feel entitled to just get up on stage and start talking. But those protesters knew that, and they were intentionally transgressing that norm in order to accomplish something. And that is something that social protesters have done since forever. That's something that Martin Luther King did, even though a lot of people don't remember him doing that. That's certainly something that even more militant black rights protesters did in the 50s and 60s and on. And that is what those protesters were doing when they interrupted that Bernie Sanders rally. And I will say this, the result of it was that after that happened, Bernie Sanders became the first major candidate to add a plank specifically referencing racial justice to his platform. He listened to them, he heard what they were saying, and he took it in, and he altered his campaign message a little bit. I mean, he still mostly talked about breaking up the banks and income inequality, and he stayed mostly on the Bernie Sanders message when he was giving speeches. But on his website, and occasionally when it would come up in debates or in interviews, he would talk very strongly and very forceful language about the desperate need to address racial inequality in this country. So in that respect, those protesters who interrupted him that day accomplished what they wanted to accomplish. So anyway, those are my thoughts on it. I don't know what you have to say about it, Puka.
I remember reading something about the protesters that one of them definitely was with some kind of conservative group.
Oh, really? Oh, you know what?
Yes.
I think I did hear something about
it.
One of them had ties to some sort of right-wing group. Yeah, I think I did remember that.
Now, not to say that you can't be in Black Lives Matter and be in a right-wing group. I mean, you know, I mean, I guess I can see it happen. It's
stranger things have happened, I guess.
Yeah. Well, but you know what? It's this gets into a case of how would I do something compared to them. And personally, I wouldn't have done it in the fashion they did it. I can understand doing civil disobedience, and I can understand disrupting an event, but and this, yeah, you know what? I'll just go ahead and piss some people off. Why not?
Why not?
Yeah. So yeah, I get what people say when they say that you know, it's not your place to criticize because it's, you know, because they're Black people going through their thing in the country. But at the same time, like, you know what, you're getting out there and you're doing things to try to get noticed and to get people. I'm assuming here that your goal is to create, at the very least, to create dialogue,
right? To
create conversation. That's why you're doing this conflict. So I'm not sure what their goal was other than to disrupt the event. Bernie Sanders did handle it very well. I think that was one of the moments in his campaign where he actually, and he was slammed for it, by the way. He was slammed by the Republicans. They said it made him look weak. But what a lot of people don't understand is that when a couple of young Black women come onto the stage and you're an older white Jewish statesman who, regardless of his position as the communist socialist senator who is hoping to bring about change in America, there is a racial history between Jewish people and Black people in America, especially from the New York City region, where he did really the only thing you could do in that situation. Anything else he would have done would probably have gone terribly. Yeah. And personally, me as a Jew, I do a little bit resent that they put him in that position. Right. And then they also went and did the same thing to Hillary, but to her, they were a lot more respectful, you know, and they actually had a conversation with her afterwards. Yeah. And this has been a frustration for me when I watch Black Lives Matter do what they do. Now, keep in mind, they are a wide, disparate organization, and I don't think they have any specific leadership. I get the impression it's kind of like just individual groups and people doing their own thing. Yeah. So I'm not criticizing the entire movement overall. Just saying, you know what, you guys all suck. Fuck you. I'm not doing that. I'm saying I have seen incidents in the movement of things that that have made me, you know, I wasn't happy with it. I was dissatisfied. For example, when that one girl, she crashed the Hillary Clinton event where she was speaking, and she started to ask her question about the super predator question. And at first I was like, this is wonderful. This is great. She's asking this question. But then she wouldn't let her answer. And it reached a point where I was like, okay, well, granted, this could have just happened because she was a young girl facing all these powerful people, and she just kind of froze up and just kept, she had a mission, and fuck it, she's sticking with it. She's going
Right.
to ask this goddamn question over and over again until they push her out the door. Now, that might have been what happened, in fairness to her, but at the same time, there was a level of frustration there where I would have loved to have heard Hillary Clinton answer that question in that situation. That would have been a powerful moment. And personally, I think they lost something there by not letting it happen. And this is something I've seen happen on other occasions in the Black Lives Movement. Like when I was at the Rutgers event, a lot of people don't know what happened in the background. When the protesters all started throwing their paint around and they eventually stormed out, I left the camera running and I chased after them. And when I got outside with them, I told them who I was. I said, you know what, I'd really like to do an interview with some or all of you where you get to speak your piece. You get to say what's on your mind. You came here, you disrupted this event, you made a lot of noise, and for better or worse, it went the way it went. But now, you know what? I'd like to actually have people hear what you have to say. And so I gave them my card. They looked at my card. I went back inside, and then nothing. I tried very hard to get in contact with them. I contacted people at the college, at the newspaper who interviewed them, and it was like they all just disappeared. They just like faded back into the woodwork of the university life. And I was just left with, well, I'm not sure what you're trying to accomplish in that point, in that case, other than disrupt the event, which you did. I mean, I personally, I think Milo won out greatly by that. I think he actually knew it was going to happen, and he capitalized on it enormously. Because from what I understand, the other events he did where he actually didn't really get disrupted and he had to answer questions, it didn't go as well for him. Because it's
fancy that.
No, well, it's there were a couple of moments you kind of miss in the event where at one point he was asked the question about, well, how would you handle? What do you think about the problem with that's what's happening with Black people in America? And his question was, and the answer he gave was a very toss-off answer. He was just like, well, you know what? I acknowledge that there's a problem. He basically said, I acknowledge that there's a problem and I acknowledge that there's a history. And then he just kind of like essentially went all right wing and blew it by saying, but you know what? It's just like, I think that this isn't the way to do it. And I'm like, okay, granted, you know what? You can say that's not the way to do it. And even I'm saying, okay, I don't think this is the way to do it. But it's one thing to criticize. It's another thing to offer solutions. Now, at least I can honestly admit, you know what? I don't have any solution because this is just such a friggin' big problem that I can make suggestions. But at the same time, I personally think my suggestions won't necessarily help all that much, which is why I'm kind of like, you know what? Okay, keep doing what you're doing and hopefully some good will come of it. Because at least you're getting noticed. And I guess there's something to be said for that in an age where the internet tosses information at you at such a rapid rate that you are yesterday's news 2 minutes after it gets posted, which I think is a lot of how these groups are operating today. They're operating from this kind of frantic position of, if we stay silent and we stop moving and for just a second, we will become irrelevant and people will forget about us.
Well, yeah, because you're right. I was going to say that's the point we're at now, but I don't know if we've ever not been at that point. I mean, especially when it comes to confronting our problems. I mean, we Americans, and I imagine it's like this in other countries as well. I mean, we love to sing our own praises, and we're very reluctant to confront our problems. Especially if we're talking about problems that fall along racial or sexual lines that don't directly affect all of us, so it's very easy for us to turn a blind eye to the protests of Black folks or as non-Black folks to just get impatient with it. I was at a dinner the other day with a family member, and thankfully it did not go beyond this point, because it would have either gotten really uncomfortable or it would have turned into like an argument. And I don't like to have either of those things happen when I'm at a family dinner. But one of the people at the table said, "Oh, I'm just so sick of hearing Black Lives Matter." And, he didn't say anything other than that. The conversation moved on from that. But if it had stayed at that point, I don't know how I could have sat there and just been quiet because, there's something about I know that's
What do you come
offensive.
from, a Protestant household, or?
Yeah.
Because if this is like a Jewish household, we'd be fighting. We'd be like, "Oh,
you'd
forget
be all
about it."
over it.
No,
You'd be like,
we'd be all over that shit. No, that would be like the next half hour's fighting.
politics and religion. That's all we talk about.
Yeah, and absolutely slander each other while you're at it.
It would get ugly, but
I can't stand the Black Lives Matter, and you dated that Shivixa woman. What's wrong with you? It would be like that. It's nonstop.
That's definitely a cultural difference because both sides of my family, in my family and my wife's family, are both very much. I wouldn't call us WASPs because I don't think we're prosperous enough to be considered WASPs, but we're definitely Protestants, and it's that sort of attitude of, don't say anything too upsetting at the dinner table. Let's just have nice, pleasant conversation.
The difference in a Jewish family is you say that at the very beginning of the dinner, and then like 3 seconds later, everybody's fighting. That's pretty much how that goes.
That's how some family dinners have gone with mine. But I just think I hear someone say that, and I know that offends me as a white person who has never experienced racial discrimination. I can only imagine what that would sound like to someone who had actually experienced the kind of injustice and the kind of oppression that not just Black Lives Matter, but racial justice groups in general advocate to raise awareness of and to change and to fix. And, it's just that sort of, but see, it doesn't affect him. The person who said that at my family dinner was a white person just like me, and he doesn't hear it every day. He doesn't live it. So to him, it's somebody else's problem. And we have a very quick inclination to focus, to say, okay, yeah, that sounds really terrible. Yeah. That's a terrible problem. And then we get distracted by something else. I mean, we have the same problem with the gun death issue in the United States, where it's like every time there's a terrible mass shooting, we get reminded of it and we think, oh yeah, that's awful. And then 2 days later, unless there's another shooting, which there might have been, who knows, it's like we can't change the subject fast enough,
Yeah. Now imagine if you're having that conversation at a dinner table and it's a Black person who says, like, I'm tired of hearing about Black lives.
Well, yeah,
I've had that happen. So
then I would be quiet because
then that gets awkward really fast.
Well, because I mean,
but you got to remember they are a political organization with different leaders in different areas, and I have heard legitimate complaints about specific people in specific sections, and I know there was I haven't really followed up on it too much, but I know there was with Ferguson, I believe it was, where I was speaking to some people who were saying that Black Lives Matter, they weren't happy with what they were doing in Ferguson and how they were.
Oh, sure.
They weren't really offering anything positive to after everything happened. They weren't offering anything positive that helped the situation. So, but that's, and I'm sure I just pissed a number of people off by saying that.
But you can't treat people, you can't treat groups of people as monolithic.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, even though I very firmly believe that the problems being described and talked about by Black Lives Matter are real problems that are in urgent need of being addressed, I know that not all Black folks feel that way. I know that I think it's probably pretty close to a universal feeling, at least among the Black folks that I know, that racism is still a problem. I know there are probably very few Black folks in the United States who would argue vigorously that racism is no longer a problem. I know there are some, because there are Black folks who vote Republican, and I don't know how they reconcile that cognitive dissonance. But I
gotta say, Steve, it's a beautiful time in a beautiful country when a white Jewish guy and a white Protestant guy can sit down and talk about the problems of Black people on the internet and have thousands of people listen. How wonderful is that?
But you know what? You just did something that a lot of white folks, because you're right, and there is something sort of icky about it that I'm not like super comfortable with. But you just did something that most white folks who do this never do, and that is acknowledge that problem.
Well, I can play the Jew card too, so I'm better off than you. You see, and that's one of those weasel words too.
You Jews, you're always playing the Jew card.
Yeah, you see, I'm safer than you.
That's true. That's true.
You're screwed.
The only marginalized identity I can claim is atheist, and when the Yeah, which
Yeah.
you know, what I tell people is if privilege was pool, I would have damn near run the table, because I'm white, I'm a man, I'm cisgender, I'm heterosexual. I speak English. I'm not like super economically privileged, but I've never had to experience real like grinding poverty. So economically, I'm doing okay, you know. And the only sort of minority thing about me is that I'm an atheist, and you can pass. You know, like if you're an
Yep.
atheist, you can pass so easy.
Yeah.
So, you know,
I have a whole bunch of minority labels, but they're friggin' boring, so I won't list them. I'll do it on somebody. If like I ever get on one of those really right wing shows, I'll
Yeah.
list them out so I can enrage the audience. Then
Oh, you got to do that.
It'll totally piss them off if I list them all out.
You've got to do that.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do it here because nobody's gonna care. Everybody's just gonna go, oh, and they're gonna want to give me kittens and shit. And I'm like, no, fuck you. I don't want a kitten. I got enough fat old cats over here.
I only want to assert my marginalized identities if I can piss people off.
Yeah, exactly. If I can piss people off, then I'll do it. But otherwise, I don't give a fuck. See, that's the attitude right there.
Yeah, that's you know, you'll get far on the internet.
Yeah. Well, there you go.
The attitude you got to have. Is there anything else we wanted to discuss before we start to pull this train into the station?
Yeah, we should probably pull it into the station. We have wandered far afield, and we have forgotten the faces of our fathers.
Exactly. It's been fun though. We should definitely do this again.
No, yeah.
Never a dull moment. Did you want to remind folks where they can find you and where your Patreon is if they wanted to give you money and all that sort of thing?
I should do that. Absolutely. You're right. So how the hell do you do that again? I guess it would be the True Puka on YouTube, because is it listed as that, or is it Philip Rose? How do they do now? They did the whole changeover, and
I think I linked your stuff in the description of this video, so people can go there. But yeah, I think as you mentioned earlier, your channel name I think is still the True Puka on YouTube.
Yeah, because you can't really change that. So so if you want to watch my channel, you go to the True Puka on YouTube. The show is a Liberal Ogre. I am Philip Rose. I have a Patreon. And absolutely give me money, because I'm an American. It validates me, you know. No, seriously though, it's there is like, if people pledge to my Patreon, then it lets me know that people are enjoying what I do. And the show I'm doing now, the Liberal Ogre, foremost, it's entertainment. I want you to have fun. And you know what? If you learn something in the process, that's great. And if you don't, that's good too. Because everybody takes everything far too seriously. I mean, it's just simply terrible. I mean, you just had your whole thing and fighting with TJ and Martin was in there, and I paid some of it until something shot. You know what? My wife she baked chocolate cake, and you weren't there for me, by the way. Just so people know, my wife baked the chocolate cake, and I ate like half of it. And then she was talking on Facebook with one of her friends about how I got sick. And they were talking about how, like, he made himself sick. And I tagged you so you can come in and defend me.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And you missed out. And I'm very disappointed, because that's what dude bros do for each other. And you would be like, I think you'd be a good dude bro wingman for me, because I always need somebody to keep me in check, because I'm always like, I'm the guy without pants. Yeah. When we're out and about, that's me. Eventually, if you hear like that, I was that guy. There are stories. I'm not going to tell them. So it's always good for me to have somebody a little more level-headed, a little more, you know what? A little more SJ. You are my SJW wingman. There you go. That's what you are. Yeah.
You need someone who will reluctantly join in on your side in the bar fight.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know what?
He's my friend. I'd better jump in there.
Yeah. And you'd set up bail money in advance.
I could figure
you're that kind of guy. Okay, good. Yeah. Because I always forget that one. So yeah, it would be that scene in the movie where they let you out, and I'd be the one like on the front steps of the police station with a cup of coffee, you know, here, how you doing? I had okay. You know what? I'm gonna leave everybody with a funny. Okay, I can't.
Okay, go for it.
I'm gonna tell this story. All right.
Okay.
So I'm gonna give you the short version, because there's a lot more leading up to it. But the short version is, I had a friend who. Okay, I'll give you a medium version, because you need. I had a friend who was working at a company, and he decided it would be a really great idea if he took some of the company funds and he invested it in a stock for the company, and then they would make a windfall. They'd, do great, because he had a tip. It didn't go that way, and apparently the stock went down. So now he was fucked, and he was facing potential charges. And So the guy running the company, he said, you know what? He said, my daughter really likes you. If you marry my daughter, then I will not press charges. So he had, and they had been dating, but he was like, fuck it, I'm never getting married. So he was just like, oh, fuck, okay, I guess I got to get married. So we all felt really, I mean, and she was great. Don't get me wrong. She was great. And we were like, you know what, you should, because you're the kind of guy, trust me, you should. So we all went out and we got totally drunk, because that's what you do when you're having I guess you can call it a bachelor party at that point, because it was really last minute. Now the thing is we went to, and this is like, I've been to a strip club like 3 or 4 times in my life. It's just not something I ever really did, but this is one of those times, and we had to go to a strip club because that's what he wanted to do, and it was in Forest Hills, and it was one of these places where they didn't serve alcohol. So in order to do the whole thing, you had to go back and forth between the bar and the strip club, and this is very complicated. You know, you reach a point where it's very hard to figure this out and to actually just like negotiate all and maneuver properly. And I had this thing where when I would drink, because I don't do that anymore, but back then when I would do it, I'd want to go to a bookstore. This was my thing. I don't know why. I had this thing where I got drunk and I wanted to go to a bookstore. So I was like, fuck it, go to a bookstore, and you guys are going to come with me because I'm drunk. And okay, the nudie bar is up the street, but we're going to stop in and we're going to go into the bookstore on the way. So we go in there, we're looking at magazines of what type, I don't know. Okay, they might have been slightly pornographic. And then we decide, now we've got to get back to the strip club. So we go to leave, but unfortunately, one of us forgot to put one of the magazines down, and store security stops us. And we're arguing with them about how we're just like, well, come on, we weren't going to steal it. Well, come on, it's a bachelor party. Give us a break. And finally, they finally get to the point, the police show up, and everybody's in agreement. We're going to let the whole thing go. And the security guard, he says, well, I don't know if we can take the magazine back because now it's like used. And he said it with this like snotty tone. And I was just like, oh, really? So I take the magazine, I shove it down my pants, I rub it around, I pull it out, and I go, there, now it's fucking used. And we got arrested so friggin' fast. They had us in cars and down, and we all got let go after the fact, because everybody calmed down eventually. But it was just like, so this is what you have to look forward to as my SJW wingman.
Well, now that I know, I can prepare myself.
Yes. You're gonna. Okay,
I won't be surprised.
We weren't recording for that last bit, right?
No, of course not.
Okay, good. Yeah,
of
so
course
that
not.
can't go up. That's just terrible.
Yeah, no. I would never do that to you.
All right, I'm gonna let everybody go.
All right, so thanks for joining me, Mr. Ogre, sir. And
you are welcome.
Yeah, and thanks to everybody for listening. I hope you got something out of it. I hope it was fun and informative, or enraged you, or
It probably did.
Whatever. I hope if you thought we were cool before, I hope you had that opinion confirmed. If you thought we were awful assholes before, I hope you had that opinion confirmed, because I don't really care. All right, thanks for listening, everybody. We'll have to do this again sometime. And if you liked what Puka had to say here, check out his channel if you haven't heard of him before, and check out his Patreon if you think he's worth a couple of bucks. I think he is. That's it. See you next time, everybody.